Globally, we see the economies around the world decaying, and this is all because of the technocratic elite and their agenda taking full effect right now. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. We have so much to discuss today. I would just touch on a few points, and you can read into it further for yourselves. More homeless camps are appearing beyond downtown LA Skid Row. This is out of the LA Times, and just wanted to note the fact that the mainstream media does not like to cover this as front page news, but here at the Money GPS, I will certainly be continuously bringing this up. We see the food stamp numbers that have been at an extremely alarming rate for the past few years, and this is a number that doesn't seem to really be declining at all. And this connects in with this article, $213 million earmarked to track LA homeless by computer and house 1,400. So what I wanted to note is the fact that they are spending over $200 million in order to house just 1,400 people. When you have a big government, oftentimes the money that is funneled towards them from our tax dollars goes to waste. We know specifically that if this was done more efficiently, there would be no reason that this would cost $200 million. But of course, by the time it trickles down to the homeless people who are actually in need, it does not, in fact, get as much as it should. So this is just one thing that you can search out for yourself to look up Waste Watch. Waste Watch is just basically for you to see the real examples like this one here. So I'm going to move on, and it involves housing. This is Gary Schilling. Nothing is going to save the housing market. This is out of Bloomberg. U.S. housing activity remains weak despite 6 years of federal government aid. Strong interest from overseas buyers, rock bottom interest rates, and massive purchases of mortgage bonds by the Federal Reserve. Does this mean that the housing may never spring back to its pre-recession levels? Many signs point to yes. So let's cover a couple things right here, what he said. This fact is true that the interest rates are all the way down. The Federal Reserve has been buying up the bonds like crazy over the past several years now, and you are having the TARP type bailouts, regulations, loopholes, everything that should be making the housing market go up. Yet it is only in a few regions where the market has come up quite a bit, like Manhattan, like San Francisco, for example. So this is just more going to show you that when you allow the government to do things like this, it will not be able to spread into the general economy. It only gets put into certain sectors which help those people in control. So a connected article with this out of ABC News. We're talking about rent prices increasing. And I have shown you on here how more people have been unable to afford homes, so they have to turn over to renting. And this is all because of the subprime mortgages allowing people to buy homes when they simply could not before. And then we look at the real statistics where you keep on getting the fraudulent statistics from the government, how they're saying more people are buying houses right now. But at the same time, more people are in fact becoming renters. So let's get on with this article. U.S. home rental prices continue to climb at a modest pace in December, but rapidly escalating costs in cities such as San Francisco and Denver suggest the apartment dwellers are facing more financial pressure. And that's pretty clear. I've been covering all the reasons why that is. The share of Americans who own their homes has slipped to 64.4% from a peak of 69% in 2004, the result of the housing market crash that triggered the Great Recession, and on and on. 7 years later, this is still going on right now. And why is that the case? You have interest rates all the way down. This should make housing affordable to just about everybody. But in fact, more people are renters because you can't just pump money using your QE schemes and think that it's somehow going to trickle its way down to the individuals. But you have policies in place that have made it extremely easy for individuals to buy a house, even when the truth of the matter is they can't afford it. But still, they are unable to buy homes. That's when you know you have a big problem, when there's virtually no protections in place and people still aren't buying. And so we'll move on right now. And this is out of the Canadian newspaper, The Globe and Mail. The 7-year slump, why the global economy can't seem to get started. The way they portray this article here, this information, is just how all mainstream media outlets do. And that is, they seem to not be able to figure out why the economy isn't getting a jump start. Bill Hammond has navigated a globally focused business through 37 years and half a dozen economic cycles, but he's never seen anything quite like the long, slow, on-again, off-again recovery that the world economy remains stuck in. Years after things should have returned to normal, frankly, he's worried. So this is pretty obvious when you look at it why the economy hasn't been able to turn over. It's because there is not a strong middle class. In fact, look at Europe. Look what's happening where we have increased taxation and austerity measures being their solutions to the problem. You have the IMF running some of these countries here, and then you wonder why they cannot get above ground. And this is what's happening. They're drowning right now. It's huge. So we'll move on to Europe. Right here out of the Wall Street Journal. A day after the ECB unveiled its bond buying program, the single currency still was in free fall, blowing past the analysts' expectations for how low the euro can go. And this is something that we need to look at. I covered it in a few videos here. I'm not going to cover it too in depth here, but basically what they have done is committed to trillions of dollars of bond buying. They said they wouldn't do this a year ago at Davos, and now today they are doing that very thing. They always do the opposite. I'm glad that many people on here were actually agreeing with me on that, and they saw exactly what happened a year ago, and now here we are printing up that currency. Some investors now say the euro could fall to the point where it is equal footing with the US dollar for the first time since it climbed above the buck in late 2002. This absolutely could happen. I wouldn't be surprised if it did happen, and this would mean a very big disaster for the euro, at least in the short term. And this wouldn't be the first time, of course, that this has happened, but we would have to realize that over time we do have fluctuations in currency. But the truth of this all is that all currencies are being devalued against real goods. I've said it before, I'll say it again. And so I'll move on right here. We have so much to cover. How Europe dream is dying state by state. As Greece prepares for an election which could decide the fate of Europe, find out how the EU project is slowly falling apart. So I'm going to put my mouse over here just on Greece, and you can see trust in the EU, 23% in Greece. The first line, and this is the reason why I'm mentioning this, the first line says, Greece is poised to be the first domino to fall in Europe's popular revolt against the EU. The dominoes falling is something that I have mentioned countless times on here. This is what's going to happen in the EU as we see nation after nation falling, and that will trigger a global collapse. This very well could trigger a global collapse. And the dominoes fall not with the strongest first, of course, but the weaker nations, and then that viral contagion begins to spread. I liken it to the dominoes because it is very telling. It's very easy to see how that will happen. And then you have countries going away from the US dollar, and there have been so many. I've been covering them on here. And this one, Iran joins the growing list of countries to ditch the dollar in foreign trade. At the bottom, in trade exchanges with foreign countries, Iran uses other currencies, including the Chinese yuan, the euro, the Turkish lira, Russian ruble, the South Korean won. They are going away from the US dollar. This is just one of many, many countries. Now, soon it will seem that no countries are going to be using it as their major currency of exchange. And what does that mean? That means the US dollar will no longer be that reserve currency. It's pretty amazing to watch this every single day. We're getting a new report of currency swaps taking place, primarily with China leading the pack here on these. Like I said, this is going to take a long time for it to change over, but it goes to show you that things are beginning to change. And what we will have out of all of this disaster, at the very end of it all, we are going to see the nations gathering together at some sort of emergency meeting. Now think back, Bretton Woods. You have to research that for yourself if you don't know what it is. But we're going to see the nations collectively getting together. And there's going to be this crisis. And they're going to have a solution already provided at the end. And that very well could be a new monetary system. It wouldn't be very far-fetched considering the fact that we're well overdue for one. 1971 was the last time we had one. Prior to that, we had the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, and then we've had previous ones throughout history. I covered them in my book, but it would not be surprising to see that happen again. When that does happen, it will mean perhaps a new reserve currency. So this is what we have to realize, what could be coming in the future. They already have the solutions provided. Don't necessarily think that everything's going to collapse. There's going to be riots in the street, and there's going to be the stock market dropping to zero, gold going up to infinity, and all of those holding gold are going to be super wealthy. They're going to be living in the Bahamas and driving around their super yachts. It doesn't necessarily work like that. Prior to a inevitable collapse, which we will definitely have to face at some point, you need to understand that they're going to collect, these nations are all going to get together and they're going to figure out a way to pump up the markets once again. Sure, we could suffer short-term deflation, absolutely, or we could have a hyperinflationary scenario. These very well could happen, and in many cases will happen. But the solution to all of that is already decided, and you have to watch and understand that we could experience a new monetary system. So before I continue to rant on, just wanted to mention a couple more things. Hard times return as China bids to bring its economic miracle to an end. This is out of The Guardian. Beijing insists slow growth is part of a plan to bring years of explosive expansion under control, but the global slowdown may make it hard to soft land an economy still hooked on exports. And that's pretty true, although we do see domestic demand increasing in China, and this has been going on for decades, in fact. But this is going to show you that they're unwilling to admit what is happening here is that you have exhausted this engine that has been going, but the growth is still happening here. I believe it's at 7.4%, which is definitely historically low in recent years. That is the slowest it's been in a long time, in fact. However, it is still growing, and we will see the fact that when the whole world's economy is going down, surely China is going to slow down too. So this is something to watch. China is at the leader of the pack in trying to change the system that we're currently on. So it is very big news, very important to watch the decisions that China makes. And at the opposite end of the spectrum, you need to look at the CNBC article. How much? $43 hot dogs at Davos. So all of the poverty that I talked about at the beginning, the homelessness, all the government waste, all of the renters that were previously buyers in the US, everything that's happening in Europe with all of this deflation, you simultaneously have certain areas that are in a inflation. And one of those things is the elite. The elite, the super class, the wealthy people of the world are doing the best that they've ever done historically right now. We see a growing disparity, a chasm, a divide, a schism that has formed in between the rich and the poor, and it has become the worst it has ever been in modern times. This is a real economic statistical fact that you need to understand and you need to look into, which is why you have to prepare right now. And by holding on to real assets, by having things like solar panels, storable food, you have your backup generators, you have the basic essentials that you need in life, and that will basically prevent the worst of the worst from happening. Sure, it may never happen, but at least you will be prepared. I talk about this more on the Insiders, and if you're not on there, I suggest getting on there. It's totally free, but I'll get into that in a moment. Just wanted to please ask that you give me a thumbs up if you found this informative. And of course, don't forget to become an insider. It's where I give out all my best intel for free. That is available at themoneygps.com. You scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.